1923, my family first moved to St. Albans and Antietam, about 3 blocks south of Joe Muir's, and shortly afterwards moved to Russell near Congress, which is very, very close to the river. As a matter of fact, when I went to the Army in 1942, some 20 years after I come to the city, I left from St. Albans and Maple in Black Bottom, and my family lived there right up until the end of the war, when we moved further east. Well, Black Bottom is the area of Detroit, generally south of Gratiot, east of Hastings Street, what is now Chrysler Expressway, and extending all the way over to Mount Elliott, the sort of triangular pie-shaped piece of land, and of course the southern boundary was the river. The oldest black community in the city of Detroit was located in Black Bottom. Across Gratiot to the north was Paradise Valley, Hastings Street, and another old segment of the black community in Detroit. There was one other sizable black community in the 20s and 30s, and that was the West Side. These were the principal black communities in the early days. There were smaller communities in Conant Gardens, and the North End, as we call it. But the basic one were the East Side, divided between Hastings Street and Black Bottom, and the West Side.
Before Kwame Kilpatrick, there was a man whose criminal enterprise ran the city of Detroit lawlessly throughout his whole time in office, dealing drugs in high volume through the likes of the Curry brothers and Johnny Curry, who was intentionally married to his niece to keep the coca business all in the family, who dealt death through a crooked police force led by Gil Hill. This is Mayor Coleman A. Young, Detroit Raw.
Mayor Young, right to the lens, if you would, sir, and...
Not in my city.
Push a little harder, sir.
Not in my city.
And you're in our city, if you would, sir.
Not in our city.
And pull your glasses off and do it. Shake them at me and make a point.
Not in our city.
Very nice. Do that once more, sir.
Not in our city.
In January of 1974, Coleman Young took office as Detroit's first black mayor. Young centered his platform on reforming police while running against the former police commissioner, John Nichols. The election followed arguably one of the most notorious eras in the city's history before Young took office. The civilian trust of administration was marked low. Stress. The decoy cop operation of 1971 to 74, dubbed the Execution Squad, resulted in a massive surge of police violence against black people, which scared the local community and served as a deterrent to civilian-officer relations.
Coleman Young. I see violence and fear in Detroit. People without jobs, without decent homes. Mr. Tough Guy's answer, beat him over the head. Mr. Councilman has had his chance, but all he does is study it. The Milken appointed, Nixon anointed instant candidate became an expert overnight. I spent a lifetime in the struggles of the people. As a senator, I've stood up on the issues and gotten things done.
Elect Coleman Young mayor. Your future depends on it.
Coleman A. Young, while a crucial figure in 20th century Detroit history, is not to blame for the continued police violence and his inability to keep his promise. Every attempted reform, regardless of the source, would be insufficient. Coleman Young was once a radical activist that became swept up in the system.
Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
Nation's not ready for a black president. You yourself are saying that that's one of the reasons that you couldn't support him wholeheartedly.
I just didn't believe he could win.
But you also have stated, or at least it's been said you've stated, that the nation isn't ready to
Well,
elect a black president.
that's why I don't believe he can win.
Okay,
I
let me
don't
ask you
believe
this.
that there are enough white voters in America that are willing to vote for a black candidate for president.
You heard the same thing in '74, though, when you were running for
The
mayor.
mathematics are different. You see, there is no relationship. When I looked at the vote in '74, I saw that this city was divided 50% black and 50% white. And I knew and I believed that if I could stimulate the black voters to come out and vote, I could win. That's different from anybody aspiring to be president of the United States. The numbers there are 10% black and 90% white.
But why not just say, as you did, that you might think that Dukakis is a better presidential candidate, and leave it at that?
I said that too.
And as such, he partnered with moderate white elites and attempted to work within a system that gave him power.
Indeed, a national urban crisis that's been too long overlooked here in Washington. The impact of New York's crises obviously spreads far beyond the borders of that city and that state, and has a very telling effect on all other cities. I can cite my own city's example, for instance, and as has been pointed out, it does not matter to the bond market whether cities have taken steps in order to correct their situation or whether they have not. In Detroit, for instance, we have within the last 18 months reduced the number of our public employees from 25,000 to 20,000. That's a 20% cut.
And with that power, he built a criminal enterprise that would move tons of cocaine through the streets of Detroit through various drug gangs, such as the Curry brothers, eliminating any competition through a crooked police force led by Gil Hill. This is Mayor Coleman Young, the last dime of Detroit, Detroit Raw.
Well, some of the early smells I remember in our neighborhood were, first of all, the smells of Eastern Market. I've mentioned that before. One of my earliest visits as a youngster, within a week after I came to Detroit, in 23, was Eastern Market during the Christmas time. And I remember very well the smell of the fresh apples, the sharp smell of snow, the various types of restaurants on the market, all types of food being cooked there. Out in the community, the strong smell of barbecue ribs was very characteristic of my neighborhood. Well,